So I was in one of those new, wildly overhyped cafes the other day, and I saw something that honestly felt like a scene straight out of a movie about our times. This woman in front of me, she ordered one of those really elaborate, colorful drinks, the kind that cost about as much as a full meal. And the moment the barista handed it to her, she didn't even take a sip. Nope. Instead, she pulls out her phone and starts what looked like a full-on professional photo shoot, adjusting the cup, finding the perfect light, snapping photos from like a dozen different angles. Finally, she seemed happy with it, and I saw her post one to her Instagram story. The caption, "A little self-care." And then this is the part that got me. She took maybe one, maybe two small sips from the straw, walked over to the trash can, and just tossed a nearly full, expensive drink inside. Then she walked out. The whole thing. The purchase, the photo, the post, that was the product. The drink itself, it was just a prop. That tiny, fleeting hit of public validation seemed to be the entire point. And it really, really made me stop and think.
In a world that's constantly selling us these instant hits of, well, manufactured happiness, what are we actually left with when the moment's over? And why does that satisfaction seem to just vanish the second we look away from our screens? That scene, that unsettling feeling from the story, something I suspect a lot of you listening might recognize. It connects directly to this pervasive cultural thing we're all swimming in, this relentless push for immediacy, for instant gratification in modern life. You see it everywhere, right? From how we binge watch shows to those impulse buys that magically appear on our doorstep the next day. This culture, it's shaping us in really profound ways, often without us even noticing. So our mission today is to really dive deep, to explore the surprising, often kind of hidden impacts of this whole instant gratification culture. We're going to uncover its effects from, your personal finances and emotional well-being right through to the very fabric of how patience and perseverance get developed in society.
It's going to be a fascinating conversation, I think, weaving together insights from behavioral economics, neuroscience, even educational research. It'll show how these forces are actively shaping who you are right now. I'm genuinely excited to explore this with you, and I think some of the connections we're going to make might actually surprise you.
That's a really sharp observation. The whole concept of instant has become so deeply embedded, hasn't it? It's almost an expectation now. We rarely stop to think about the trade-offs involved. The short-term gains are obviously appealing. They're designed to be, right? Which makes it incredibly easy for the long-term consequences to get overlooked, or sometimes even strategically hidden by those who, profit from our impatience. This deep dive should really unpack how that plays out in some very tangible and maybe sometimes surprising parts of our lives.
Okay, so let's start by unpacking a concept that's absolutely key to understanding why we often fall into these, seemingly obvious traps. It's something called present bias. Basically, present bias is that really common human tendency where we consistently overvalue rewards we can get right now and struggle to delay gratification, even for something potentially way better down the road. Think of it like a fundamental part of how we make decisions. Our present self, the you that's experiencing this moment, almost instinctively prioritizes instant pleasure or avoiding immediate discomfort. And that often comes at the expense of the more abstract, distant well-being of our future self. It's that little voice in your head saying, I want that dessert now, even if the now choice messes up your health goals later on.
And what's really fascinating here is that this present bias isn't just like a personal weakness,
Yeah.
It's not just a lack of willpower that some people have and others don't. It's actually a well-documented, pretty robust principle in behavioral economics. It's a systematic cognitive bias that affects pretty much everyone, at least to some degree. We're not talking about a character flaw here. We're looking at a predictable pattern in how humans make decisions. It's closely tied to what researchers call time inconsistency.
Time inconsistency. What does that mean exactly?
It means our preferences aren't stable over time. So what sounds like a perfectly rational, good idea for our future self, like, say, starting a new savings plan next month, suddenly seems much less appealing, and often it gets put off when next month actually arrives and becomes the immediate present. We feel the cost of saving much more sharply now. This shifting preference is what often leads us to regret choices we made impulsively. Our immediate short-term desires can dramatically pull away from our long-term intentions and values. It's that gap, really, between what we intend to do and what we actually end up doing.
Right. And you can see the tangible financial consequences of that bias so clearly, especially when you look at consumer debt. Credit cards, they seem almost perfectly designed to exploit this exact human tendency, don't they? Just think about this. A huge chunk of cardholders, something like 45%, admit they at least sometimes carry a balance. They're not paying off their full statement each month. And for those who do carry debt, the average amount they say they owe is substantial, often thousands of dollars. And honestly, we can probably guess the actual number is even higher, right? People tend to underreport borrowing for all sorts of reasons. These aren't just dry numbers. They really highlight two things. One, credit card debt is a massive issue for millions. And two, for those carrying it, it's often a really significant burden.
Exactly. And this leads us straight into a really compelling study that directly connected present bias to credit card borrowing habits. It focused on a group of about 600 low to moderate income individuals. Now, the researchers used a pretty clever method to objectively measure individual discount factors. That's basically how much a person discounts or devalues a reward if they have to wait for it.
Okay, so not just asking them, but actually measuring their choices.
Precisely. It was crucial because it gets around potentially unreliable self-reporting. Participants had to make a series of incentivized choices. Things like, would you prefer $75 today or $80 in 1 month? Or $75 in 6 months versus $80 in 7 months. By looking at these choices across different time frames, they could pinpoint individuals with a strong present bias, those who showed significantly less patience, specifically when an immediate payment option was on the table.
What did they find? Was there a clear link?
Oh, the results were really striking. Individuals identified as present biased weren't just a little more likely, they were significantly more likely to carry credit card debt, somewhere between 15 and 20 percentage points more likely.
Wow, that's quite a gap.
It is. And what's maybe even more impactful, if they already had debt, these present bias individuals borrowed about 25% more on their cards. That worked out to roughly an additional $379 compared to similar people without this strong bias.
And this held up even when they accounted for things like income.
Absolutely. The association proved remarkably robust. It held strong even when they controlled for a whole range of other financial and demographic factors, income, credit limits, even other types of debt like payday loans. And crucially, the study used objective credit report data, not just what people said they owed. That makes the link much more compelling, much more reliable. It just powerfully shows that present bias isn't some abstract idea economists debate. It has very real, measurable, and often pretty damaging financial consequences for everyday people.
And that kind of financial trap you're describing, I think so many of us recognize that feeling, even if we haven't fallen deep into debt. That impulse, that feeling of needing something now, even when part of your brain knows the future cost. It reminds me of this feeling. The glow of the screen was my midnight sun. Another sleepless Tuesday, another cart filled with things I didn't know I needed an hour ago. There was the serum promising a glass skin finish by Friday, the linen trousers perfect for a vacation I hadn't planned, and a limited edition sneaker that screamed exclusivity. With each click on the Pay with Klarna button, the future felt like a distant, hazy country where some other, more capable version of me lived. She would handle the bills. My job was just to feel the dopamine rush of the confirmation email, the brief, shimmering high of possessing. The package would arrive tomorrow, a cardboard box of temporary happiness. But tonight, as I closed the laptop, a different feeling crept in, a cold, quiet dread. It was the weight of all those tomorrows, all those small, easy payments gathering into a storm cloud I refused to look at directly. The present me was living well, but she was paying for it with the currency of a future self. I was slowly bankrupting.
That captures the struggle perfectly, doesn't it? That internal negotiation or lack thereof. And it leads us right to an important question. How do financial firms, intentionally or sometimes maybe unintentionally respond to and, often leverage these built-in consumer biases? The reality is, often quite deliberately, they design products and marketing strategies specifically to their advantage. Think about it. Financial products are inherently complex for most people. They're abstract, intangible, often with these really intricate charging structures that are hard to fully grasp. It's not like buying an apple where the price is right there.
Right, it's not straightforward.
Not at all. So, faced with this complexity, what do consumers naturally do? They simplify. They latch onto easily digestible things like headline rates or the initial benefits. And firms strategically design their pricing to exploit this. They might offer these really enticing low or even zero initial charges or super appealing headline rates. But then they cleverly bury higher fees for features people might not think they'll use or charges that only kick in after an introductory period.
Like credit card teaser rates, the 0% introductory APR.
Exactly. That's the classic powerful example. A very low or 0% APR for a few months, then bam, a significantly higher standard rate kicks in. This structure is incredibly attractive to present biased individuals. They focus mainly on that immediate low cost and systematically underestimate how much they'll actually borrow later or how likely they are to carry a balance once that intro period ends. Advertising and sales tactics are also really skillfully crafted. They highlight the attractive benefits while subtly obscuring hidden costs, playing directly on various cognitive biases.
Like what kind of biases?
Well, loss aversion, for instance. Framing add-on insurance by emphasizing what you stand to lose if you don't buy it, playing on that fear of future regret rather than just stating the upfront cost. Or overconfidence, encouraging the belief that you're somehow superior at picking winning stocks or managing investments, which can lead to taking on too much risk. And projection bias, where we underestimate how our future spending habits might change or our future need for emergency funds. This makes long-term contracts or loans seem way more manageable in the present than they might actually turn out to be. These strategies basically create an environment where consumer mistakes aren't just common, they're often predictable, and crucially, pretty profitable for the firms involved.
So it's kind of surprising then, isn't it? You'd think in competitive markets, maybe the savvy consumers would force companies to be fairer, more transparent. But you're saying the presence of sophisticated consumers doesn't always protect the less sophisticated ones.
It often doesn't work out quite like that, unfortunately. We might assume competition would iron out these exploitative practices, but instead, this dynamic can lead to what economists call cross-subsidies.
Cross-subsidies?
Yeah. So take those tempting teaser rates on credit cards again. They might mostly benefit the really sophisticated consumers, the ones who are super organized and quick to switch cards the moment the introductory offer ends, always chasing the next best deal. This effectively means that the high hidden charges, the high interest rates, the unexpected fees paid by the present biased, maybe less sophisticated consumers who get stuck end up subsidizing the benefits the savvy switchers get.
Wow. So the firms still profit, and the most vulnerable consumers often end up footing the bill, maybe without even fully realizing it.
Precisely. That's often how it plays out. And this complex situation really highlights exactly why understanding behavioral economics has become so incredibly crucial for financial regulators, like the FCA in the UK, for instance. Their mission is to protect consumers. They recognize that if consumer mistakes are predictable, if they stem from these inherent cognitive biases, not just a simple lack of information, then there's a strong case for what's sometimes called paternalistic intervention.
Paternalistic intervention. That sounds a bit controlling.
It can sound that way, but the idea isn't about restricting freedom or choice in some heavy-handed, authoritarian way. It's more about stepping in to protect consumers from their own predictable mistakes. The goal is to enhance their long-term well-being by designing environments where people are more likely to make choices that actually align with their own long-term interests, especially when immediate impulses might lead them astray. Think of it more like creating guardrails, not cages.
Okay, guardrails, not cages. I like that. But how do they do that?
Well, one really powerful and less restrictive tool is the use of nudges. These are small, cleverly designed prompts or changes in the way choices are presented, the choice architecture, that subtly guide consumers towards better decisions without taking away their ultimate freedom to choose.
Can you give an example?
Sure. A classic one is automatic enrollment in workplace pension systems. Instead of having to actively sign up, you're automatically enrolled, but you always have the clear option to opt out if you want to. This simple switch massively increases participation rates compared to systems where you have to actively opt in. Another great example is setting opt-out defaults for add-on insurance when you buy something, like travel insurance with a flight. Studies have shown a huge jump in purchase rates from maybe 40% when you have to actively choose it, opt in, to around 80% when it's automatically included unless you uncheck the box, opt out.
Wow, just changing the default makes that much difference.
It's astonishingly effective. These are simple, elegant changes that respect consumer autonomy, but leverage our natural tendencies like inertia or sticking with the default to achieve better outcomes for more people. Regulators are also increasingly using randomized controlled trials, or RCTs. These are basically the gold standard for testing if an intervention actually works. You rigorously compare a group that gets the nudge or the new information format against a control group that doesn't.
Like in medicine.
Exactly like in medical trials. So, for example, RCTs have shown that consumers over-respond to those credit card teaser rates by almost 3 times compared to simple flat rates. It proves they systematically underestimate their future borrowing. RCTs have also been used to dramatically improve how effective communications are, like by redesigning letters sent to consumers to encourage them to claim money they were owed, maybe using clearer language, bullet points, highlighting key info response rates increased by an incredible 6.5 times. This scientific approach makes sure regulatory actions aren't just based on good intentions, but on solid evidence of what actually works to guide human behavior towards better financial outcomes.
So if I'm getting this right, this whole regulatory approach isn't about taking away our choices or making decisions for us. It's more about designing the environments where we make choices in a smarter way, kind of helping us make decisions that actually align with our long-term financial health. It acknowledges that sometimes, yeah, our gut reactions, our built-in biases can lead us down the wrong path.
That's a perfect summary. It's less about dictating and more about enabling better choices by understanding how people really make decisions.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit now. We've talked about the external financial impacts. Let's move to something much more internal. That psychological battle going on inside ourselves. It's about how we manage our emotions. And it's fascinating, this insight you hear from investment giants like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. They consistently argue that temperament, the ability to control your emotions, your impulses, is far more crucial than raw intelligence for long-term success, especially in the crazy world of investing. Buffett famously said something like, investing isn't about high IQ, it's about having the right temperament to stay rational when everyone else is freaking out.
You're absolutely right, and that hits on such a critical point. Connecting this to the bigger picture, that emphasis on temperament really reveals the deep neurobiological and psychological roots of emotional stability and its opposite, impulsivity. Our brains, they were quite literally designed for survival in the jungle, as the saying goes. They're hardwired for strong, fast emotional responses. Now, those emotions are incredibly useful for immediate physical threats, but in our complex modern world, if they're left unchecked, they can absolutely hijack our rational judgment. Just think about what happens during big market bubbles or crashes. Investors aren't just calmly processing data, they're experiencing real physiological surges. Stress hormones like cortisol, linked to fear and anxiety, can flood the system during a downturn, amplifying panic selling. Conversely, you might get surges of excitement-inducing hormones like testosterone during a speculative boom, fueling reckless risk-taking. These biological responses actually amplify irrational group behavior, leading to either excessive caution or just wild exuberance, pushing careful analysis completely aside. The older, more primal parts of our brain basically take the wheel from the newer, more rational prefrontal cortex.
That's such a compelling parallel then, isn't it? When you think about how so many modern digital experiences, especially those short video platforms like TikTok or Reels, they seem masterfully designed to exploit those exact same neurological mechanisms. They use these really strong stimuli, flashing colors, rapid cuts, instant likes, comments, and immediate feedback to keep users locked in this continuous, almost conditioned reflex cycle of scrolling.
Yeah, it's like a constant drip feed.
Exactly. A constant instant hit of engagement, a mini dopamine rush every few seconds. It taps directly into our primal urges for novelty and social validation. And it effectively bypasses our rational, long-term thinking, kind of like how market volatility can hijack an investor's judgment. It trains us, conditions us to expect instant gratification.
Precisely. It's the same underlying mechanism being exploited. And this brings us right to a cornerstone of psychological resilience and long-term well-being, the power of delayed gratification. Now, the classic Stanford marshmallow experiment is widely known, though its implications have been debated quite a bit over the years.
All right, the one with the kids and the marshmallows.
That's the one. It famously suggested that children who could demonstrate the self-control to wait for a larger delayed reward 2 marshmallows later instead of 1 now tended to show greater confidence, better stress management, even higher academic success later in life. Now, it's true, later research added important nuances. Factors like a child's trust in the person promising the reward or their socioeconomic background definitely play a role.
Yeah, I heard about that. Like if you grow up where promises are often broken, maybe taking the sure thing now makes sense.
Exactly. A child from an unstable environment might reasonably grab the immediate marshmallow because they can't actually trust that a future promise will be kept. But despite these important nuances, the core insights still hold a lot of weight. That fundamental capacity for emotional restraint, the ability to forego immediate pleasure for a greater, more meaningful future benefit is incredibly powerful. And cultivating this self-control, it isn't really about depriving yourself, making life less fun. It's actually quite profoundly about a kind of devotion to a future self that you genuinely care about. It's a consistent practice that fosters this inner steadiness, this quiet confidence, and cultivates real self-respect. It's that quiet strength that lets you act based on your long-term values, rather than being constantly yanked around by fleeting urges, external pressures, or whatever the latest trend is. This inner discipline isn't a punishment. It's actually a pathway to a more grounded, more fulfilling, and ultimately a freer way of living. It's about building your life by design, not just reacting by default.
That idea of devotion to a future self and the deep, quiet satisfaction that comes from intentional delay. It reminds me so strongly of my grandfather, Alistair. His whole way of being was like a masterclass in that principle. My grandfather, Alistair, smelled of cedar shavings and patience. His workshop was this complete sanctuary from the pinging, frantic world outside. For a whole year, I watched him build a cello. He didn't order some kit. He started with raw maple and spruce, just slabs of potential that honestly looked like firewood to me back then. He'd spend an entire afternoon just tracing the curve of the C-bow, the waist of the cello. His hand was so steady, his breath slow. The wood tells you its pace, not the other way around, he'd say. He'd tap the spruce top to hear its resonance, the sound only he could seem to interpret. While my friends were all chasing viral trends and, next day shipping, I was watching him carve the scroll, that intricate spiral at the top. It took weeks of this meticulous, repetitive motion. There was absolutely no instant reward, only the slow, quiet satisfaction of seeing this perfect spiral emerge from a block of wood.
And when he finally strung it up and drew the bow across for the very first time, the note that filled that dusty air wasn't just music. It was the sound of resilience. It was this deep, resonant hum of well-being that was built not in a fleeting moment, but over an entire season of devotion. It was a kind of joy that settles deep in your bones, something no phone notification could ever deliver.
What a beautiful, beautiful and profound story. It just perfectly encapsulates the core message here, doesn't it? The immense value of that purposeful delay and the rich, enduring satisfaction. It brings something, as you said, no fleeting notification can possibly match. That devotion to a process, to a future outcome, it's the real antidote to the instant gratification cycle we're talking about. It also makes us think about how we navigate the other kinds of behavioral traps that feed into emotional instability in our decisions and our daily lives. Beyond just present bias, there are several other major cognitive pitfalls we need to be aware of.
Okay, what else should we watch out for?
Well, first, there's social contagion, what most people call herd behavior. We see it constantly leading to irrational actions, whether it's everyone chasing speculative gains in a market bubble because everyone else is getting rich, or panic selling during a crash because everyone else is bailing out. And the age of social media just amplifies this collective madness to an absolutely unprecedented degree. Trends, sentiments, fears, they can spread globally in an instant, often completely overriding individual judgment. So maintaining independent thinking, having the courage to stand apart from the crowd when necessary, becomes absolutely critical in this kind of environment.
So easy to get swept up.
Incredibly easy. Second, we have to contend with result-oriented bias. This is the real danger of judging how good a decision was based only on the outcome. Good luck can, and often does, make a terrible decision look brilliant, right? Which leads to overconfidence and repeating flawed strategies. Conversely, bad luck can make a perfectly sound, well-written strategy look like a failure, causing people to abandon it way too early. It's vital to maintain systematic thinking and discipline, focusing on the quality of your process, not just getting fixated on a single outcome. Don't ditch a good plan just because of one bad break.
Focus on the method, not just the immediate result.
Got it.
Exactly. And finally, we just have to acknowledge our inherent cognitive biases themselves. These are an intrinsic part of being human. We're all prone to them, and they can't be completely eliminated. Trying to be perfectly rational all the time, that's an impossible and frankly exhausting goal. However, and this is the crucial part, through conscious learning, consistent self-reflection, maybe some targeted training, individuals can significantly improve their self-awareness. You can learn to spot these psychological weaknesses as they pop up and manage their impact. It moves us closer to rational decision-making. Perfect rationality might be an ideal, but significant improvement in mental discipline is totally achievable.
And it sounds like it's not just about managing our internal biases, right?
Yeah.
It's also about dealing with the sheer flood of information hitting us every single day. This modern challenge of information filtering in an era of just constant data. It feels immense.
It is immense.
Our brains seem disproportionately sensitive to new, negative, or dramatic information. I guess it's an old survival mechanism, but in the digital age, it often feels like it works against us. Think about how often Bad news or sensational headlines are the things that really grab and hold our attention.
Right.
And this information, more often than not, it just serves as noise in the grand scheme of things, doesn't it? It distracts us from what's genuinely important. Emotionally stable individuals seem to have this crucial ability to filter that noise, to figure out what actually matters, and to focus on the long-term signals, whether that's in the stock market and personal growth or understanding complex social issues. They aren't swayed by every little blip on the radar or every fleeting outrage. They've developed a different kind of inner radar, it seems.
Exactly. That ability to filter the noise, to discern the signal, is a real hallmark of what we mean by emotional stability. And again, it's not about the absence of emotion. It's not about being cold or unfeeling. True emotional stability is more like the masterful ability to navigate through emotions like a surfer. You ride the waves, you feel them, but you're not pulled under by them. You can even harness their inherent energy. It's about preventing emotions from constantly hijacking your judgment and your long-term goals. The real path forward, the way to build this stability, lies in establishing a clear, coherent pathway from cognition through emotions to action. This allows our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors to actually be aligned, working together, rather than being in constant conflict. That leads to more purposeful, more effective, and ultimately much more fulfilling living.
Okay, so let's zoom out even further now. Let's look at the wider societal consequences of this cultural shift towards immediacy, particularly its impact on, say, character development and the education system itself. How are we actually teaching the next generation to handle this relentless pressure for instant everything?
That's a huge and critical question. There was an insightful, large-scale European comparative study focused specifically on character education in schools. It involved over 2,600 teachers and nearly 8,000 parents across 7 different European countries, places like the UK, Austria, Spain, Poland. It really tried to understand what parents and teachers truly value in education today.
And what did it find? Did it match common assumptions?
Well, some findings were quite surprising, especially regarding parental school choice. Conventional wisdom often assumes parents prioritize academic results, test scores, rankings above all else. But this study found parents overwhelmingly rated the quality of teaching as most important, over 80%. And perhaps even more strikingly, the values espoused by the school, its moral ethos, its focus on character ranked extremely high for nearly 2/3 of parents.
Wow, so values were almost as important as teaching quality.
Very close, yes. And in stark contrast, those traditionally emphasized metrics like official inspection reports, school league tables, even exam results themselves were far less significant in their decision-making. Only about 1 in 7 parents prioritized those. It strongly suggests this deep, maybe often overlooked, parental desire for schools to nurture a strong moral compass and character, going way beyond just academic performance. Parents seem to want education for the whole child.
And did parents and teachers actually believe schools should be teaching character?
Overwhelmingly, yes. Both parents and teachers showed incredibly strong belief in its importance. Large majorities expressed strong agreement that character education is necessary. Furthermore, about 3/4 of parents believed character education ought to be included in the school curriculum, and around 70% thought schools should actively publish a statement of the core character traits they aim to develop. So it's definitely not some niche idea, it's a widely held conviction.
How did teachers think it should be delivered? Was it like a separate class?
Mostly no. Teachers preferred to integrate character education primarily through all curriculum subjects. About 3/4 felt this way, and through the whole school ethos, the general atmosphere and culture, nearly 70%. Extracurriculars were seen as supplementary. This shows a belief that character isn't just taught in one lesson slot, but it needs to be woven into the entire fabric of school life. And encouragingly, nearly 80% of teachers felt confident in their ability to deliver it effectively.
Okay, this is really interesting. Did they see a conflict between focusing on character and academics? Like, does one take time away from the other?
That's perhaps the most encouraging finding. Both parents, 87%, and teachers, a huge 91.6%, strongly believe that a greater focus on character education actually positively affects pupils' attainment. This directly challenges that common narrative that there's some kind of trade-off, that you have to choose between character development and academic achievement. Instead, they seem to see a mutual positive relationship. Developing virtues like perseverance, self-discipline, honesty, these things actually help students succeed academically rather than hindering them. It's a really powerful argument for a more holistic approach to education, especially in our current age where those virtues feel more challenged than ever by instant gratification culture.
That is really revealing. But you mentioned something about a misperception gap. What was that?
Ah, yes, that was fascinating. The study found that while teachers generally valued character development more than academic achievement, and parents tended to view them as equally important, both groups incorrectly assumed the other group prioritized academic achievement much more than they actually did.
Wait, so teachers thought parents only cared about grades, and parents thought teachers only cared about grades. But neither was really true.
Exactly. Teachers, in particular, significantly overestimated how much parents prioritized academics. Parents valued character much more than teachers thought they did. It highlights this critical disconnect in understanding between parents and teachers, these key stakeholders in education. If that gap could be bridged, imagine how much more effective character education efforts could be. It suggests there's this sort of hidden societal agreement or yearning for these virtues that isn't being fully acted upon because of this mutual misunderstanding about priorities. And expanding on that societal shift, it's not just happening in formal education. Digital platforms, especially social media, have just dramatically transformed the whole landscape of youth activism and civic engagement around the world. We've seen this clear evolution, right? From traditional, often localized, physical protests and meetings to these massive, widespread online petitions and movements driven by social media. Think about things like hashtag Black Lives Matter or Fridays for Future or hashtag Me Too. These movements have powerfully harnessed the internet to mobilize millions, particularly young activists.
Yeah, the scale is incredible.
It is. The benefits are undeniable. Faster mobilization, broader participation, more diverse frames of activism that can easily cross national borders. It gives young people really unprecedented opportunities for political and social engagement. Information spreads like wildfire, allowing rapid responses to global events. However, and this is crucial, we absolutely have to acknowledge the significant challenges that come along with this. Things like the incredibly rapid spread of misinformation and disinformation, the persistent digital divide where access isn't equal for everyone, growing concerns about privacy and data security, and also the often unseen mental toll of online engagement.
Mental toll, you mean burnout?
Burnout, anxiety, exhaustion, that constant exposure to online conflict, outrage, the pressure to always be performing activism or commenting, it can be incredibly draining. It can even lead to a kind of performative activism.
Yeah.
Lots of hashtags, but maybe less deep, sustained engagement with the hard, slow work of change. So while technology empowers in amazing ways, it also introduces these really complex new issues that we need to think about carefully if you want to foster genuine, patient, deep civic engagement, not just fleeting online moments.
That shift, that tension between deep engagement and instant takes, it resonates so much with what I see teaching every day. It's a struggle that plays out constantly in the classroom. The bell hadn't rung, but I already lost half of them. They weren't misbehaving, not in the usual way. They were just kind of absent, their minds scrolling through invisible feeds while I was trying to unpack the really painstaking compromises that led to the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. "Why do we have to read all this?" a student named Chloe asked me, her thumb twitching over her phone hidden under the desk. "Can't you just show us a video summary?" And it felt like the question of her generation. They weren't lazy. They were just so conditioned for the summary, the hot take, the 60-second explanation. They seemed to see patience, the effort of wading through complexity, as a glitch, not a virtue. My job felt like it was no longer just teaching history, but teaching the effort of understanding it. Trying to convince them that wrestling with a dense, difficult primary source actually builds a kind of mental muscle, a type of character, that a quick YouTube summary just can't give you. I worry sometimes that a society raised on instant answers will just have no patience for the slow, messy, complicated work of democracy, no perseverance for tackling problems that can't be solved with a single swipe. Sometimes I feel a bit hopeless about it. But then maybe a quiet boy in the back, Leo, he'll stay after class. "I don't get this part about reparations," he'll say, pointing to a paragraph we spent 20 minutes discussing. "It feels, I don't know, more complicated than it looks." And in that moment, I see this little spark, a willingness to actually dig deeper, to wrestle with it. And I'm reminded that my real job, maybe the most important part, is to protect that flicker of curiosity from the constant winds of immediacy.
Your story about Chloe and Leo just perfectly illustrates that core challenge, doesn't it? Fostering patience and deeper engagement in a world demanding instant answers. And that struggle you describe so vividly in the classroom, it extends right into family dynamics too, especially around the digital divide and the clash of generational patience. It's a specific and often really frustrating challenge that many adult children face. You see your parents or older relatives maybe effortlessly doom scrolling through Facebook for hours.
Yeah. Definitely seen that.
But then they seem to struggle immensely with what feel like essential digital tasks. Booking flights online, logging into their healthcare portal, ordering a taxi with an app. The paradox can be genuinely baffling.
It really can. Why is that?
Well, insights from aging studies suggest it's complex. While many older adults are perfectly, fully capable cognitively of learning new technologies, they might lack the agency, the confidence, or initiative to start learning. Or they might be genuinely paralyzed by the fear of getting it wrong, especially when it involves sensitive financial or health information. And this fear is often amplified by a very real and understandable fear of online scams and security breaches, which they hear about constantly.
That makes sense. The stakes feel high.
Exactly. Plus,
And there's such a deep emotional layer to that whole challenge too, isn't there? That tension we feel inside between our own occasional impatience, because let's be real, we all feel it when trying to explain something we find simple, and that deep desire to be truly present and supportive for our aging loved ones. When you find yourself getting short or frustrated trying to help with tech stuff, maybe it's worth pausing. Reminding yourself that these seemingly small acts of tech assistance, these moments of patient guidance, they can actually be viewed as incredibly meaningful acts of gratitude. They kind of mirror the countless acts of patience and unwavering care our parents showed us when we were growing up, teaching us everything from tying our shoes to navigating all the complexities of childhood.
that's a beautiful way to frame it.
It's like a way of continuing that cycle of care, showing love, even when it really tests our own capacity for patience. It's a call to actually embody the very virtues, patience, perseverance that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And this brings us right back to the heart of reclaiming our time, building that more resilient inner world, really understanding emotional instability. It's important to see it not as one single fixed state, but more like a spectrum structure with different ways it shows up. We often talk about emotional dysregulation. That's more like an external loss of control, intense reactions that feel disproportionate and are hard to manage. Then there's emotional reactivity, which is more like an overreaction to stimuli, maybe stemming from a highly sensitive nervous system. But perhaps the most insidious form, and certainly what feels like a chronic poison of modernity, is internal conflict.
Internal conflict.
Yeah, that persistent inner struggle between what you want to do, what you know is good for you in the long run, and what your immediate impulses compel you to actually do. This constant inner battle, this kind of self-negation, leads to this profound dissipation of mental and emotional energy. It's why so many of us feel increasingly intelligent, we know more than ever, yet we also feel increasingly exhausted, just caught in this cycle of internal friction.
Right. So the goal then isn't to somehow suppress or eliminate our emotions entirely, right? To become some kind of, I don't know, emotionless robot. That's not stability. That just sounds like repression.
Exactly. That's not the goal at all.
Instead, true emotional stability seems to be about mastering the ability to let our emotions become an aid to cognition and action rather than a hindrance. It's about harnessing that, as you said, intense fire burning within us, all our emotions, our conflicts, and transforming it into purposeful outward energy. It's recognizing that our inner self isn't static. It's always evolving, always seeking to transform and grow. And our emotions, if we understand them, can actually be powerful allies on that journey.
Beautifully put. And to achieve that mastery, to build that stability, we can actively cultivate some very practical research-informed strategies. These help enhance emotional stability and reduce that pervasive internal exhaustion caused by those constant emotional tug-of-wars. Now, these aren't quick fixes, obviously. They are consistent practices that build resilience and self-control over time, directly pushing back against the pull of instant gratification.
Okay, so what are some concrete things we can do?
All right, first, practice mindful breathing. This isn't just about relaxation. It's a seriously powerful tool to interrupt that impulse reaction loop we get stuck in. Just a simple daily habit, maybe 5-10 minutes of slow, deep breathing. It can profoundly calm that physiological excitement, help clear out cluttered thoughts, and interrupt cycles of overthinking. It creates a vital micropause, giving your rational brain a chance to step in before you act on an instant urge. And related to this, increasing physical activity also contributes significantly to both physiological and emotional balance.
Okay, breathing and moving makes sense. Yeah. What else?
Second, keep an emotion journal. This is a remarkably low-cost but high-impact practice. Just 5-10 minutes a day of expressive writing. It helps you externalize and organize those chaotic thoughts swirling around. It provides a safe outlet for intense emotions, which in turn reduces stress and anxiety. But crucially, it massively improves your self-awareness of your own emotional triggers and those patterns of seeking instant gratification. You start to recognize when you're about to make an impulsive decision and can hit pause.
Interesting. So just writing it down helps you see the patterns.
It really does. Third, filter information and social interactions. In this age of overload, consciously managing the quantity and quality of information you consume daily is vital. Maybe limit social media scrolling to a fixed, intentional time, say 30 minutes, maybe even less. Don't just let it fill every empty moment. And just as important, review your interpersonal relationships. Be brave enough to minimize interactions with people who consistently drain your emotions, with negativity, constant drama, endless demands. Setting healthy boundaries is crucial for protecting your vital energy. It's about curating your mental environment.
It can be tough, setting boundaries, but yeah, I see how draining some interactions could be.
It takes courage, definitely. Fourth, focus on the controllable. When you're facing troubling situations, make a sharp distinction between the factors you can actually control and those you absolutely cannot. Channel your energy intensely into the controllable aspects. Take immediate, even small, practical actions on those things. This proactive approach massively boosts your sense of control and self-efficacy, actively reducing feelings of helplessness and anxiety. And for the uncontrollable factors, practice radical acceptance. Work on the difficult but ultimately freeing act of letting go. This stops you wasting precious emotional energy on things completely outside your influence.
Control what you can, accept what you can't. Easier said than done sometimes, but okay.
It's a practice for sure. Fifth, simplify daily decisions. Recognize decision fatigue, that mental exhaustion that builds up from making too many trivial choices all day long. So strategically automate as many of those small daily decisions as you can. Things like planning your outfits for the week, prepping meals, having a set morning routine. This preserves your finite willpower for the bigger, more important decisions, especially those requiring delayed gratification. And adequate sleep is absolutely critical here too. Being sleep deprived directly weakens your impulse control and emotional regulation, making you way more susceptible to those instant urges.
Get enough sleep, make fewer small decisions.
Got it. Sixth, engage in positive cognitive restructuring. This is the skill of actively reframing problems and negative thoughts into more positive, objective, and constructive ones. Talk to yourself like you would talk to a good friend. Replace those self-defeating thoughts like, I always mess this up, with constructive language like, okay, this is a challenge, but what can I learn from it?
Yeah.
It involves seeing setbacks through a growth lens, using rational questions to challenge exaggerated fears or catastrophic thinking. Personality plays a role, sure, but having a supportive social circle that encourages this kind of positive framing can really help you see options beyond immediate despair or frustration.
Changing the internal narrative, that sounds powerful.
It really is. And finally, number 7, adopt a long-term perspective. This is about consciously training yourself to view short-term gains and losses through a much broader long-term lens. Set clear, distant goals, whether they're financial, personal, professional, and consciously frame present challenges or temporary setbacks not as failures, but as necessary steps or learning experiences on that longer journey. Before you react to an immediate impulse or a minor frustration, ask yourself honestly, will this genuinely still matter in a few years? That simple question can dramatically reduce immediate anxiety and impulsivity. Focus on the lessons learned and future growth, rather than getting bogged down in temporary ups and downs. This is really the ultimate countermeasure to instant gratification thinking.
Ultimately, then, what we're really talking about is that embracing the virtue of delay, as you called it, it's actually a powerful, maybe subtle act of rebellion in this world that's just obsessed with speed and getting everything instantly.
It is a form of rebellion, yes.
It's about more than just being patient. It's about maybe respecting ourselves enough not to be dictated by fleeting trends, but by our deepest values. It embodies that profound freedom not to act sometimes, choosing instead to pause, to reassess, and to align with our long-term values over those temporary flashing urges. It's a deliberate choice to build something deeper, more meaningful, and ultimately far more satisfying in the long run. We've really covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? Exploring how this relentless chase for instant gratification so often leads to just fleeting satisfaction and a lot of hidden cost, whether it's in our bank accounts, our emotional lives, or even the character of society. What we seem to have uncovered is that when you consciously choose patience, when you work on emotional stability, you're not actually missing out on life's pleasures. You're building something deeper, a more resonant sense of fulfillment. It seems it's in that quiet, often quite challenging space of intentional delay that real character gets shaped, and a robust, resilient self can actually begin to thrive.
That's beautifully said. True strength, it seems, isn't found in that frantic chase for external validation or those fleeting pleasures that just evaporate. It's really found in developing the inner clarity that allows us to distinguish between all the endless noise of superficial desires and the true, meaningful signals of a life well lived. It's about converting that intense fire burning within us, all our emotions, our conflicts, our drives, into purposeful outward energy. Recognizing that your inner self is never stagnant. It's a constantly evolving entity, always seeking to transform, to learn, and to grow into its fullest potential.